rebels, the quiet revolutionaries who whisper defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. This book is dedicated to those who dare to question the narratives imposed upon them, who refuse to accept the reality presented without scrutiny, and who seek truth even in the deepest shadows. It is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, the unwavering capacity for hope even when surrounded by darkness, and the indomitable will to fight for a better world even when that world seems to exist only in the fragmented landscapes of dreams. To those who have felt the subtle manipulations of power, the insidious whispers that undermine self-determination and autonomy, this story offers a glimmer of understanding and a call to action. It acknowledges the pervasive nature of control, the pervasive influence of unseen forces, and the daunting task of resisting them. But it also celebrates the resilience of the human psyche, the capacity to awaken from the slumber of complacency and forge one's own path, even amidst the chaos and uncertainty of a world shrouded in deception. It is dedicated to the unsung heroes of resistance, those who fight their battles in the hidden corners of consciousness, those whose efforts may seem small and insignificant, but whose cumulative impact can shatter the foundations of even the most entrenched systems of control. They are the ones who, through their courage and persistence, hold the potential to dismantle the machinations of power, to reveal the truth concealed beneath layers of manipulation, and to usher in an era of greater freedom and self-awareness. For those who have dared to dream, those who have seen the shadows, and those who have sought to awaken others from their slumber, this book is a heartfelt expression of gratitude and admiration. Your strength, your perseverance, and your commitment to truth are the very essence of this narrative. May this story serve as a reminder that even the smallest spark of rebellion can ignite a wildfire, and that the fight for liberation, though arduous, is always worth undertaking. For in the heart of every dream lies the potential for a revolution, and in the depths of every rebellion lies the promise of a new dawn. This book is an ode to that promise. May it serve as both a mirror and a map, reflecting the struggles we face and illuminating the path towards a future where consciousness is free. Chapter 1. The Whispers of the Dream 3. The air hung heavy with the scent of ozone and cheap synth noodles, a familiar aroma in Neo-Kyoto's sprawling, neon-drenched underbelly. Anya, a young artist with eyes the color of a twilight sky and hair like spun moonlight, navigated the crowded streets, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. The city thrummed with a frenetic energy, a chaotic symphony of hover cars, chattering crowds, and the rhythmic pulse of holographic advertisements. Above, sleek skyscrapers pierced the smog-choked sky, their polished surfaces reflecting a distorted image of a world grappling with technological advancements and the enduring shadows of social inequality. Anya's life was, on the surface, unremarkable. She spent her days sketching the city's vibrant chaos, capturing the fleeting moments of beauty amidst the urban decay. Her nights were filled with the quiet solitude of her small apartment, the hum of her aging computer, a constant companion as she worked on her digital art. She had a handful of close friends, a supportive, if somewhat distant family, and a quiet contentment that masked a deeper, unspoken unease. It was a feeling she couldn't quite place, a subtle dissonance in the rhythm of her everyday life, like a faint off-key note in a beautiful melody. This feeling, this persistent unease, was a whisper, a subtle premonition of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. Neo-Kyoto was a city divided not by physical walls or political boundaries, but by a more insidious, ethereal separation. It was a city split between two intertwined realities, the waking world with its tangible streets and tangible struggles, and the dreamscape, a shared subconscious realm where the lines between reality and illusion blurred. The dreamscape was a place of limitless potential, a vibrant tapestry woven from the collective unconscious of the city's inhabitants. It was a place of breathtaking beauty, where impossible landscapes unfolded and the boundaries of imagination knew no limits. It was also a place of terrifying vulnerability, a landscape ripe for manipulation. Anya, like most citizens of Neo-Kyoto, was largely oblivious to the second reality, the hidden currents that flowed beneath the surface of her daily life. She knew of the dreamscape, of course, as everyone did. It was a commonplace topic of conversation, a shared experience acknowledged but not truly understood. It was a place of fleeting images, forgotten melodies, and the occasional bizarre, inexplicable dream that faded into the hazy periphery of memory upon waking. But the dreamscape held a darker secret, one that only a select few were privy to. In the shadows of the city's technological marvels, a clandestine organization known only as the Architects operated, their influence as pervasive as the city's ubiquitous network. Their power stemmed from their ability to subtly manipulate the dreamscape, weaving narratives and implanting suggestions into the subconscious minds of unsuspecting sleepers. These subtle manipulations were not violent or overtly coercive, but rather insidious, designed to shape thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, guiding the waking lives of the city's inhabitants towards predetermined ends. Their aim was subtle yet absolute, the maintenance of control. The Architects were masters of suggestion, puppeteers of the subconscious. They didn't force compliance, they guided it. A seemingly insignificant dream, a fleeting image, a half-remembered conversation, these were the tools of their trade, used to nudge individuals toward paths that suited the organization's agenda. A seemingly random purchase, a hastily made decision, a sudden shift in political allegiance, these were the subtle ripples spreading outward from their carefully orchestrated interventions in the dreamscape. Anya's own life, she was slowly beginning to realize, was not entirely her own. There were moments, fleeting glimpses, when the threads of her decisions felt oddly disconnected, as if her actions were guided by a hand unseen, a will not her own. It was a subtle manipulation, almost imperceptible, yet it left her with a lingering sense of unease, a creeping suspicion that something was fundamentally wrong. She was a cog in a machine, unknowingly playing a role in a grand design, her life guided by unseen forces pulling the strings from the shadows. The city itself was a microcosm of this division, a reflection of the anxieties and uncertainties of the modern world. The stark contrast between gleaming skyscrapers and the squalid poverty of the lower levels highlighted the vast gulf between the privileged elite and the disenfranchised masses. This disparity mirrored the unseen schism between those aware of the Architect's control and the oblivious masses, a chasm as deep and as wide as the gap between the waking world and the dreamscape. The technology that powered Neo-Kyoto also served as a tool of control. The city's ubiquitous network, a seamless web of interconnected devices, was the conduit through which the Architects exerted their influence. The seemingly innocuous devices, the omnipresent data pads, the sophisticated AI assistants, the personalized advertising displays were all potential entry points, subtle avenues through which the organization could penetrate the minds of the citizens. The very infrastructure of Neo-Kyoto, its gleaming towers and humming networks, was complicit in the Architect's pervasive control. Anya, still unaware of the full extent of the manipulation, felt a growing unease. The whispers of a conspiracy, faint at first, were now becoming increasingly insistent, echoing in the silent spaces between her thoughts and actions. These whispers, barely audible at first, were the harbingers of a rebellion, a rising tide of discontent gathering momentum in the hidden corners of the city and the even more hidden depths of the shared dreamscape. Anya, without even knowing it, was about to become a key player in a battle for the very essence of human consciousness and the freedom of the mind. Her seemingly ordinary life was about to become anything but. The world was divided, and she was standing on the precipice, about to take a leap into the unknown. The whispers of the dream were growing louder, and Anya was beginning to listen. The usual hum of her apartment, usually a comforting backdrop to her late-night digital painting, felt invasive. A low thrumming, almost subsonic, vibrated through the floorboards, setting her teeth on edge. Anya rubbed her eyes, the remnants of a dream clinging to the edges of her consciousness like stubborn cobwebs. It wasn't the usual drift of half-formed images and forgotten melodies, the common ephemera of the dreamscape most Neo-Kyoto citizens experienced. This dream was sharp, visceral, disturbingly real. She had been in a place of impossible geometry. A city built of twisting obsidian spires that seemed to writhe and shift even as she looked upon them. The sky was a bruised purple, shot through with streaks of electric blue. Instead of the familiar, muted tones of the dreamscape most people encountered, this realm pulsed with an almost painful intensity of color and light. The air hummed with a silent energy charged with anticipation and dread. And then there were the figures. They weren't individuals, not in the traditional sense. They were more like projections, shimmering silhouettes that moved with unsettling grace, their forms shifting and reforming like liquid mercury. They were cloaked in shadows, their faces obscured, their movements purposeful and coordinated. They seemed to be orchestrating something, manipulating the very fabric of this surreal city, their gestures subtle but undeniably powerful. She felt a sense of impending doom, a chilling premonition that hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating like smog. Anya tried to approach the shadowy figures, to understand what they were doing, but they seemed to anticipate her movements, always a step ahead, as if they could read her thoughts. As she drew closer, she began to hear whispers, not audible sounds, but rather impressions that directly resonated within her mind. They were fragmented snippets of conversations, half-formed sentences, and urgent warnings. Words like architect, control, and rebellion echoed within her mind, weaving together a narrative she couldn't grasp, a story that felt both familiar and alien. Amidst the chaos, she saw glimpses of something else, a flash of defiance. Small, scattered groups of individuals, their forms less distinct than the shadowy figures, but with a palpable sense of resistance. They fought back, not with weapons, but with ideas, whispers of their own that seemed to push back against the controlling forces. Their efforts seemed almost futile, tiny sparks of resistance against a tidal wave of oppression, yet they battled with a fierce intensity, a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. She saw these rebels communicating in the same subtle way the architects did, using the very fabric of the dreamscape as a conduit for their messages. The dream ended abruptly, plunging Anya into the stark reality of her apartment. The lingering hum from the floorboards had ceased, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The lingering impression of the dream, however, remained. The shadows, the whispers, the rebellion, they were all imprinted on her mind, blurring the line between the tangible world and the intangible dreamscape. The vibrant colors of the dream still burned behind her eyelids, a sharp contrast to the muted gray of her apartment walls. She felt drained, exhausted in a way sleep usually didn't accomplish. The unsettling intensity of the dream lingered, leaving her with a deep sense of unease. The whispers, though silent now, still echoed in the periphery of her consciousness, a persistent drone beneath the surface of her thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that the dream wasn't just a dream. It was a warning. The morning light filtered through her blinds, revealing the familiar clutter of her workspace. The scent of synth noodles still clung to the air, a jarring contrast to the otherworldly aroma that had permeated her dream. She tried to rationalize the experience, to dismiss it as a vivid nightmare, a product of stress and overwork. But the images were too sharp, the emotions too real. The feeling of being watched, of being manipulated, was deeply unsettling. Anya began sketching, attempting to capture the impossible geometry of the dream city, the shifting silhouettes of the architects, and the fleeting glimpses of the rebels. But her hand faltered, unable to adequately translate the surreal landscape onto the page. Her usual artistic fluency was gone, replaced by a frustrating inability to capture the essence of what she had seen. The dream was escaping her grasp, dissolving into fragments and shadows. Throughout the day, a subtle dissonance permeated her experiences. She found herself questioning her own decisions, the seemingly random choices she'd made in recent weeks. Conversations with friends and family felt slightly off, the words exchanged carrying an undercurrent of meaning that she couldn't quite decipher. The seamless flow of her daily routines felt interrupted, replaced by a disconcerting sense of detachment, of being an observer rather than a participant in her own life. The unease intensified as the day wore on, growing into a full-blown anxiety. She was aware of it now, a constant gnawing feeling that something was profoundly wrong. The whispers from her dream, now augmented by a similar unease in the waking world, suggested a deeper connection between her experiences, a shared reality she only now started to perceive. Was her entire life a product of manipulation? Was she a pawn in a game she didn't even understand? Anya spent that night researching online, seeking any information that could corroborate her experiences. She delved into the deep web, navigating forums and obscure websites devoted to fringe theories and conspiracy speculations. She came across snippets of information that hinted at the existence of a shadowy organization controlling the dreamscape, manipulating human behavior through subtle subconscious manipulation. The term architects was mentioned, though often in cryptic and coded language. The information was scant, scattered, and mostly dismissed as the ramblings of conspiracy theorists. Yet the pieces, though fragmented, seemed to fit with her dream, confirming her suspicions. The more she dug, the more convinced she became that her dream was not a dream at all, but a glimpse into a hidden reality. The rebellion in the dreamscape, the struggle against the architects, mirrored the subtle resistance she now saw in the real world. This resistance, however, remained as elusive as the organization itself. The city, she realized, was not just divided between the wealthy elite and the poor, it was also divided between those aware of the architect's control and those blissfully unaware, a division mirrored in the conflict within the dreamscape. She was caught in between, her life a delicate balance between two worlds, a world she was starting to recognize and one she was starting to fight for. As she closed her laptop and drifted off to sleep, she felt a flicker of hope, a small spark of defiance in the face of the overwhelming power of the architects. The whispers, though menacing, held a faint promise. A promise of rebellion, of awakening, of liberation. She was no longer just a dreamer. She was a potential revolutionary, a tiny spark in a vast and shadowy conspiracy. The game had begun, and Anya was ready to play her part. Sleep, however, did not bring respite, instead bringing visions of the Obsidian City, more vivid, more detailed than before. A clear sign the rebellion was closer than she thought. The whispers were no longer subtle, they were deafening. The fight had begun. The digital hum of her apartment felt less invasive now, replaced by a gnawing unease that burrowed deep into her bones. Anya's initial fear had morphed into a grim determination. The whispers, the Obsidian City, the shadowy architects, they were no longer just figments of a disturbing dream. They were pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve. She spent the next few days immersed in her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she delved into the darker corners of the internet. Her usual artistic pursuits were abandoned, replaced by a feverish obsession to uncover the truth behind her unsettling visions. Her search began with the keywords that had echoed in her mind: architect, control, rebellion. The initial results were predictable: articles on urban planning, political discourse, and the usual conspiracy theories that populated the fringes of the web. Yet amidst the noise, a pattern began to emerge. Cryptic forum posts, coded messages hidden within seemingly innocuous online games, whispered conversations in encrypted chat rooms, all pointed towards the existence of something far more sinister. A recurring motif emerged: fragmented stories of individuals experiencing similar dreams, bizarre and unsettling visions mirroring her own. They described the same Obsidian City, the same shadowy figures, the same sense of overwhelming oppression. Many dismissed their experiences as mere hallucinations, nightmares brought on by stress or mental illness. Others, however, spoke of a shared consciousness, a collective dreamscape manipulated by unseen forces. One forum post, buried deep within a labyrinthine thread discussing lucid dreaming techniques, caught her attention. The post was titled, "They Watch Us Even When We Sleep." It contained a link to an encrypted chat room, its address concealed within a complex cipher. Anya, surprisingly adept at code breaking from her days as a digital artist, quickly cracked the code. The link led her to a hidden online community, a secret society of individuals who claimed to be aware of the architect's control. The chat room was a hive of activity, a whirlwind of whispered conversations and coded messages. Anya initially hesitated, unsure if she could trust these strangers, these digital shadows who shared her unsettling visions. Yet the desperation to understand her experiences, to find someone who could validate her sanity, outweighed her apprehension. She introduced herself cautiously, revealing only snippets of her experience, testing the waters before divulging the full extent of her knowledge. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The members of the community, calling themselves the Awakened, greeted her with a mixture of caution and relief. They had been expecting someone like her, someone who had seen the truth behind the veil. They shared their experiences, corroborating her visions and filling in the missing pieces of the puzzle. Their revelations were both horrifying and exhilarating. The architects, they explained, were not merely manipulating dreams. They were manipulating reality itself. Through subtle subconscious manipulation, they controlled human behavior, influencing decisions on a global scale, shaping political events, and even guiding economic trends. They were puppeteers, pulling the strings of humanity from behind a curtain of illusion. The Awakened explained that the Obsidian City in Anya's dreams was a representation of the architect's control center, a nexus of their power. The shadowy figures she had seen were not merely projections, but manifestations of the architects themselves, their forms shifting and reforming as they adjusted their control mechanisms. The whispers she had heard were not random snippets of conversations, but carefully crafted messages designed to influence the subconscious, guiding the dreams of sleepers toward specific goals. The rebels, the fleeting glimpses of resistance Anya had witnessed, were members of the awakened, fighting back against the architect's control. Their struggle, they explained, was not a physical one, but a war of ideas, a battle waged within the dreamscape itself. They used the shared consciousness to communicate, to spread awareness, to plant seeds of rebellion in the minds of others. Their methods were subtle, their actions clandestine, their progress painstakingly slow. The awakened shared their techniques for resisting the architect's influence, methods for strengthening their mental defenses, and strategies for communicating within the dreamscape. They taught her how to navigate the surreal landscapes of her dreams, how to identify the architect's manipulations, and how to empower the rebels within the shared consciousness. One evening, during a virtual meeting, a new name appeared on the encrypted chat, Kai. His profile was minimal, a single cryptic image of a raven perched on a crumbling obsidian spire. He introduced himself with a quiet confidence that set him apart from the others, his words carrying an undercurrent of weariness and profound understanding. Kai's communication style was different. He didn't engage in the panicked discussions or frantic theories that often characterize the group's exchanges. Instead, he offered subtle insights, his pronouncements precise and chillingly accurate. He seemed to anticipate their questions, his responses laced with a knowledge that transcended the collective experience of the awakened. He spoke of patterns and cycles, of the architect's meticulous methodologies, revealing nuances of manipulation that none of them had previously considered. He spoke of the dream world as a carefully constructed garden, where each individual's subconscious fears and desires were nurtured and twisted to the architect's purpose. Intrigued and slightly apprehensive, Anya initiated a private chat with Kai. Their conversation stretched late into the night, delving into the darkest corners of the architect's machinations. Kai spoke of the organization's history, a history older than recorded time, its origins shrouded in myth and legend. He mentioned ancient civilizations, fallen empires, and forgotten technologies, painting a picture of the architects as architects of not just dreams, but of human history itself. They haven't just been manipulating dreams for a few decades. Kai typed, his words appearing slowly, deliberately, as if each character was carefully weighed. They've been shaping reality since the dawn of consciousness. Their methods have evolved, of course, becoming more sophisticated, more insidious. But the core strategy remains the same. Control through manipulation of the subconscious. Anya asked about the Obsidian City, the recurring symbol of the architect's power. Kai's response sent a chill down her spine. The Obsidian City is not just a symbol, he wrote. It's a nexus, a focal point. It's where they collect the data, process it, and disseminate their influence. It exists both in the dream world and in the waking world, a complex interplay of the physical and the ethereal. Anya pressed him on the nature of this interplay, her questions fueled by a growing sense of unease. Kai revealed details that were both horrifying and strangely compelling. He described the architects as an amalgamation of consciousnesses, a hive mind that transcends individual personalities, capable of perceiving and influencing reality on a scale beyond human comprehension. Think of it as a parasitic entity, Kai explained, one that has interwoven itself into the very fabric of human consciousness. It feeds on our fears, our desires, our vulnerabilities. It uses our collective unconsciousness as its power source. Kai then revealed a detail that shocked Anya to her core. He alluded to a personal connection with the architects, a past trauma that had shattered his life and given him an intimate understanding of their methods. He refused to elaborate, only hinting at a betrayal, a catastrophic loss, a price paid for knowledge. His past, he implied, was inextricably linked to the organization's machinations, a wound that continued to fester within him. He spoke of the rebellion not as a unified force, but as a scattered collection of individuals fighting a decentralized war, their successes as fleeting as the dreams they inhabited. He warned her that the architect's influence extended far beyond the dreamscape. They controlled information flows, manipulated social structures, and shaped political narratives. They were the puppeteers of the world, pulling strings unseen and unheard. They are masters of deception, he typed, blending reality and illusion so seamlessly that most people never even suspect their manipulation. They work through our insecurities, our biases, our very desires. They whisper promises of power, of comfort, of belonging, while subtly eroding our autonomy, shaping us into compliant instruments of their will. Kai's warnings went beyond the theoretical. He described specific strategies the architects employed, techniques of subtle coercion and psychological manipulation. He revealed how they used algorithms to tailor information to individuals, reinforcing existing biases and creating echo chambers that amplified their influence. He spoke of the manipulation of social media, of the subtle biases embedded in news reports, of the insidious power of targeted advertising, all designed to shape behaviors and opinions on a global scale. The conversation was unnerving, a descent into the abyss of human manipulation. Yet it also fueled Anya's resolve. Kai's words, though chilling, provided a framework, a map to navigate this treacherous landscape. He offered her a new perspective, a way to understand the architect's influence, not just in the dreamscape, but in the waking world as well. He suggested strategies for resisting this influence, methods of cultivating self-awareness, and techniques for identifying the patterns of manipulation. He advised her to focus on strengthening her own mental fortitude, to cultivate critical thinking skills, and to become aware of the subtle suggestions and manipulations that permeated her daily life. As their conversation ended, Anya felt a strange blend of terror and exhilaration. The world she had known had been irrevocably altered. The boundaries between dreams and reality had blurred into an indistinguishable mist. Yet she felt a sense of purpose, a newfound strength forged in the crucible of fear. Kai, with his enigmatic persona and profound insight, had become a pivotal figure in her journey. He was a guide, a mentor, but also a warning, a stark reminder of the insidious power of the architects and the potential cost of resistance. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, and their meaning had deepened. The struggle for consciousness was not just a dream. It was a desperate fight for the very soul of humanity. And Anya, along with the awakened and the enigmatic Kai, was at the very forefront of the battle. The fight, she realized, was far from over. The war for humanity's mind had only just begun. The days following her conversation with Kai were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The weight of his revelations pressed down on her, a constant, suffocating presence. Sleep offered no respite. Her dreams were now a chaotic tapestry of obsidian spires, distorted faces, and the chilling whisper of unseen voices. The vibrant colors of her paintings now seemed dull, lifeless, reflecting the gray uncertainty that had settled over her world. The familiar comfort of her apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, confining her to a reality she no longer fully understood. She found herself obsessively rereading Kai's messages, searching for hidden meanings, for clues she might have missed. His words, once shocking, were now becoming chillingly familiar. She began to see the patterns he had described, the subtle manipulations in the news, the targeted advertising that seemed to anticipate her thoughts. The world, once a vibrant canvas of possibility, was now revealed as a meticulously constructed stage set, its scenery and actors carefully orchestrated to maintain a carefully constructed illusion. The choice before Anya was stark and terrifying. She could retreat, bury herself in her art, and ignore the unsettling truth that had been revealed. She could choose to remain comfortable in her blissful ignorance, to pretend that the world she knew was real, unmarred by the parasitic influence of the architects. It was a tempting option, a siren song luring her back to a semblance of normalcy. The thought of continuing her life, unburdened by the knowledge of this insidious conspiracy, was a powerful draw. She could return to her solitary existence, the world of colors and textures she had always known, and escape the shadows that now clung to her like a shroud. But the alternative, the path Kai had unwittingly laid before her, was far more daunting. It was a path that demanded courage, sacrifice, and a willingness to confront a terrifying reality. It meant rejecting the comfortable illusion and stepping into the chilling light of truth. This path demanded that she abandon the life she knew, the life of a solitary artist, and immerse herself in a world of shadows and secrets, a world where the boundaries of reality were fluid and treacherous. It meant risking everything, her safety, her sanity, her very life, to fight a war she didn't even know how to win. The weight of this decision pressed upon her, a crushing burden that made it difficult to breathe, to think, to even paint. The vibrant colors that once flowed so freely from her brush now seemed muted, lifeless, mirroring the uncertainty that had consumed her. Every brushstroke felt clumsy, hesitant, reflecting the inner turmoil that raged within her. Her art, once a source of solace and joy, had become a stark reflection of her fractured state, a haunting testament to the world that had been ripped apart. She attempted to return to her routine, to the familiar rhythm of her days, but the unsettling knowledge burrowed deep within her, disrupting the fragile equilibrium she had once maintained. Even simple tasks seemed monumental, fraught with the unsettling awareness of the architect's manipulation. The news reports, once a source of information, now felt like carefully crafted propaganda, their headlines and narratives designed to reinforce existing biases and maintain the illusion of control. The advertisements, once merely annoying interruptions, now felt like insidious whispers, designed to target her vulnerabilities and shape her desires. Her conversations with the other awakened felt different now. Their anxieties, once seemingly isolated incidents, now formed a pattern, a tapestry of shared experience. She saw the insidious influence of the architects in their doubts, their fears, their hesitations. She began to recognize the subtle nuances of manipulation that Kai had described, the careful orchestration of information, the reinforcement of biases, the creation of echo chambers that amplified their fear, a newfound strength forged in the crucible of fear. Kai, with his enigmatic persona and profound insight, had become a pivotal figure in her journey. He was a guide, a mentor, but also a warning, a stark reminder of the insidious power of the architects and the potential cost of resistance. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, and their meaning had deepened. The struggle for consciousness was not just a dream. It was a desperate fight for the very soul of humanity. And Anya, along with the awakened and the enigmatic Kai, was at the very forefront of the battle. The fight, she realized, was far from over. The war for humanity's mind had only just begun. The days following her conversation with Kai were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The weight of his revelations pressed down on her, a constant, suffocating presence. Sleep offered no respite. Her dreams were now a chaotic tapestry of obsidian spires, distorted faces, and the chilling whisper of unseen voices. The vibrant colors of her paintings now seemed dull, lifeless, reflecting the gray uncertainty that had settled over her world. The familiar comfort of her apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, confining her to a reality she no longer fully understood. She found herself obsessively rereading Kai's messages, searching for hidden meanings, for clues she might have missed. His words, once shocking, were now becoming chillingly familiar. She began to see the patterns he had described, the subtle manipulations in the news, the targeted advertising that seemed to anticipate her thoughts. The world, once a vibrant canvas of possibility, was now revealed as a meticulously constructed stage set, its scenery and actors carefully orchestrated to maintain a carefully constructed illusion. The choice before Anya was stark and terrifying. She could retreat, bury herself in her art, and ignore the unsettling truth that had been revealed. She could choose to remain comfortable in her blissful ignorance, to pretend that the world she knew was real, unmarred by the parasitic influence of the architects. It was a tempting option, a siren song luring her back to a semblance of normalcy. The thought of continuing her life, unburdened by the knowledge of this insidious conspiracy, was a powerful draw. She could return to her solitary existence, the world of colors and textures she had always known, and escape the shadows that now clung to her like a shroud. But the alternative, the path Kai had unwittingly laid before her, was far more daunting. It was a path that demanded courage, sacrifice, and a willingness to confront a terrifying reality. It meant rejecting the comfortable illusion and stepping into the chilling light of truth. This path demanded that she abandon the life she knew, the life of a solitary artist, and immerse herself in a world of shadows and secrets, a world where the boundaries of reality were fluid and treacherous. It meant risking everything, her safety, her sanity, her very life, to fight a war she didn't even know how to win. The weight of this decision pressed upon her, a crushing burden that made it difficult to breathe, to think, to even paint. The vibrant colors that once flowed so freely from her brush now seemed muted, lifeless, mirroring the uncertainty that had consumed her. Every brushstroke felt clumsy, hesitant, reflecting the inner turmoil that raged within her. Her art, once a source of solace and joy, had become a stark reflection of her fractured state, a haunting testament to the world that had been ripped apart. She attempted to return to her routine, to the familiar rhythm of her days, but the unsettling knowledge burrowed deep within her, disrupting the fragile equilibrium she had once maintained. Even simple tasks seemed monumental, fraught with the unsettling awareness of the architect's manipulation. The news reports, once a source of information, now felt like carefully crafted propaganda, their headlines and narratives designed to reinforce existing biases and maintain the illusion of control. The advertisements, once merely annoying interruptions, now felt like insidious whispers, designed to target her vulnerabilities and shape her desires. Her conversations with the other awakened felt different now. Their anxieties, once seemingly isolated incidents, now formed a pattern, a tapestry of shared experience. She saw the insidious influence of the architects in their doubts, their fears, their hesitations. She began to recognize the subtle nuances of manipulation that Kai had described, the careful orchestration of information, the reinforcement of biases, the creation of echo chambers that amplified their fears. The constant bombardment of tailored information designed to sow discord and confusion was almost overwhelming. The choice, however, remained. She could continue to observe, to analyze, to learn, but to remain passive, a silent observer in this unfolding drama. Or she could actively engage, throw her weight into the fray, and risk everything in the desperate struggle for humanity's very consciousness. The latter option was terrifying. The thought of confronting such an overwhelming power, a force that controlled dreams and reality itself, filled her with a profound sense of dread. But the alternative, to do nothing, was equally terrifying. The thought of watching passively as humanity was slowly consumed by this parasitic entity, its autonomy eroded, its will subjugated, was a prospect she could not bear to contemplate. She considered the personal cost. She envisioned the potential loss of her life, the sacrifice of her creative dreams. She saw herself consumed by the shadow war, her own individuality slowly being erased, lost in the anonymity of the resistance. She pictured the potential harm to those close to her, the collateral damage of such a perilous fight. What right did she have to risk the safety of others? What if she failed? What if her efforts proved futile, her actions leading only to greater suffering? Yet she also contemplated the potential rewards. She envisioned a future where humanity was free, its consciousness unburdened by the architect's control. She imagined a world where the dreamscape was a haven of creativity, not a battlefield for manipulation. She envisioned a future where individuals were empowered to think critically, to resist the manipulation, to shape their own destinies. This was a vision worth fighting for, a future worth sacrificing everything to achieve. One evening, as she stared at the blank canvas before her, a single image formed in her mind, a raven perched atop a crumbling obsidian spire. It was the same image she had seen in Kai's profile. It seemed to echo his warning, a grim reminder of the battle ahead. But this time, instead of fear, she felt a surge of determination. The image served as a catalyst, finally solidifying her choice. The whispers in her dreams had become a roar, a call to action. Anya would not retreat. She would not remain silent. She would fight. She typed a single message to Kai, a simple affirmation of her decision. I'm in. The words hung in the digital space between them, a silent promise in the midst of the ongoing digital war. She knew the road ahead would be long, arduous, and fraught with peril. The fight for humanity's mind was far from over. But Anya, armed with the chilling truth and a newfound resolve, was ready to begin. The war had begun, and she was ready to face the enemy head-on. She felt the first tremor of the battle, a subtle shift in the very fabric of reality itself, a confirmation that the fight had truly begun. She had made her choice. The whispers were no longer just dreams. They were the battle cry for a war she would now wage with every fiber of her being. And she knew with a chilling certainty that this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Subconscious. The obsidian spire, a recurring motif in her nightmares, now loomed before her, not as a menacing structure of fear, but as a gateway. It pulsed with a faint internal light, its surface shimmering with an ethereal, almost iridescent quality. This wasn't the chaotic dreamscape of fragmented images and whispered voices. This was different. This was structured, organized, almost designed. Anya found herself standing at the base of the spire, the ground beneath her feet strangely solid, yet yielding like fine sand. The air hummed with a low, resonant frequency, vibrating through her very bones. She could feel the energy thrumming around her, a palpable force that both excited and terrified her. The air itself tasted metallic, sharp and clean like ozone after a thunderstorm. Around her, the landscape unfolded. an impossible juxtaposition of stark geometric forms and organic flowing curves. Obsidian cliffs rose into the night sky, their surfaces etched with patterns that seemed to shift and writhe before her eyes. Strange bioluminescent flora illuminated the landscape with an otherworldly glow, their delicate petals pulsing with an inner light. Waterfalls cascaded down the cliffs, their water glowing with an internal luminescence, the sound a hypnotic whisper that echoed through the strange dreamscape. She cautiously took a step forward, the sand shifting beneath her feet. The air grew colder, the metallic tang intensifying. The ground vibrated with an almost imperceptible tremor, a subtle pulse that resonated deep within her. She felt a strange sense of familiarity, a recognition of the landscape that transcended logic and reason. It was as if a forgotten memory, buried deep within her subconscious, was surfacing, revealing itself in this surreal and beautiful dreamscape. The ascent was treacherous. The spire seemed to shift and reform as she climbed, its path ever-changing, testing her resolve and her navigation skills. The obsidian was impossibly smooth, yet provided a surprising grip. She climbed with an unnatural grace, her movements fluid and intuitive, as if guided by an unseen force. The air thinned with every step she took, the humming intensifying. The luminescent flora became denser, their light casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on her perception. She encountered other beings in this dreamscape. Some were amorphous, shifting shapes of light and shadow, their forms constantly in flux. Others were more defined, but their features were strangely distorted, their faces masked by an ethereal veil. They did not speak in words, but in images, in emotions, in fleeting sensations that pierced her consciousness. They communicated not through language, but through pure thought, a direct exchange of ideas and feelings that bypassed the limitations of verbal expression. Some were friendly, offering guidance and support. Others were hostile, their presence radiating malevolence and a palpable sense of danger. She learned to navigate the subtle currents of this dreamscape, to sense the shift in energies, to anticipate the changes in the landscape. She learned to discern friend from foe, to identify those beings who were part of the architect's influence from those who were aligned with resistance. The dreamscape was not simply a place of beauty and wonder, it was also a battlefield, a contested territory where the forces of control and liberation clashed. The dangers were subtle but deadly. Illusions shimmered at the edge of her perception, tempting her with false promises, trying to lure her into traps. Her own thoughts, her own fears and doubts were weaponized against her, manifesting as physical obstacles, psychological barriers, and emotional assaults. The architecture of the dreamscape itself seemed to shift and change in response to her emotions, her fears amplifying the dangers, her courage paving a path forward. She discovered the resistance in the dreamscape, fighting for the freedom of consciousness against the architect's manipulation. One particular encounter proved pivotal. She met an ancient being, its form vaguely humanoid, but radiating a timeless wisdom. It spoke not in words, but in pure understanding, conveying centuries of knowledge, insights into the nature of consciousness, the methods of the architects, and the strategies for resisting their control. The being revealed the true nature of the architect's control. It wasn't merely a manipulation of information. It was a subtle invasion of consciousness itself, a warping of perception, a distortion of reality woven into the very fabric of human experience. The being showed Anya how the architects used dreams to plant suggestions, to sow seeds of doubt and fear, to reinforce pre-existing biases and create echo chambers that amplified societal divisions. They controlled not only the flow of information, but also the very architecture of dreams, creating personalized narratives designed to maintain compliance and prevent the awakening of human consciousness. The being revealed that the dreamscape itself was a battleground, a crucial front in the larger war for humanity's mind. The being showed her techniques to strengthen her mental defenses, to recognize and resist the architect's manipulations within the dreamscape. She learned to identify the subtle whispers, the insidious suggestions, the carefully crafted illusions. She learned to fortify her own consciousness, to cultivate her awareness, to become a stronger, more resilient presence within this ethereal realm. The training was rigorous, demanding both mental and emotional resilience. She faced her deepest fears, confronting her own insecurities and vulnerabilities. She struggled against the architect's attempts to break her resolve, to undermine her confidence, and to erode her sense of self. But with each challenge, she grew stronger. Her will hardened, her awareness sharpened. By the time she reached the summit of the obsidian spire, Anya was transformed. She was no longer the hesitant artist who had first entered this dreamscape. She was a warrior of consciousness, equipped with the knowledge and skills to navigate this dangerous yet beautiful realm. The view from the summit was breathtaking, a panorama of impossible landscapes stretching to the horizon. But her focus wasn't on the beauty, it was on the war that lay ahead. She was ready. She had entered the dreamscape, and now she would change it. The fight had begun, and Anya would be at the vanguard, defending humanity's mind, one dream at a time. The whispers in the dreamscape now sounded like a battle cry, a call to arms. She was no longer simply Anya the artist. She was a guardian of consciousness, a warrior in the dream. The war for humanity's mind had begun, and she was ready to fight. The summit of the obsidian spire wasn't a peak in the literal sense, it was more of a plateau, a vast expanse of polished obsidian that shimmered under the ethereal light of the bioluminescent flora. The view was breathtaking, a panorama of impossible landscapes stretching to the horizon, yet Anya barely registered it. Her attention was drawn to a small cluster of figures gathered near a shimmering waterfall that cascaded into a pool of glowing water. They were the resistance. They didn't look like warriors in the traditional sense. There was no gleaming armor, no weapons of steel or fire. Their strength lay in something far more subtle, far more profound, the strength of their minds, the resilience of their spirits, the unwavering commitment to their cause. One figure caught Anya's eye immediately. A woman perhaps in her late 30s, with hair like spun moonlight and eyes that held the wisdom of ages. She radiated an aura of calm strength, a quiet confidence that spoke volumes. Anya sensed a deep empathy emanating from her, a profound understanding of the human condition. This was Lyra, the leader of the resistance, the woman who had guided many through the labyrinthine paths of the dreamscape. Next to Lyra stood a man, his features sharp and angular, his eyes reflecting a restless energy. He moved with a dancer's grace, his body fluid and responsive, a stark contrast to the rigid forms of the obsidian landscape. This was Kai, a master of the dreamscape's subtle energies, able to manipulate the very fabric of the realm, creating pathways where there were none, deflecting attacks before they materialized. His power was tied to his intense focus, his body seemed an extension of his will, his consciousness shaping the reality around him. A younger woman, barely more than a girl, stood a little apart, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. Her name was Alara, and her unique ability lay in her uncanny perception. She could sense the subtle shifts in energy, detect hidden dangers, and unravel the architect's illusions with a precision that bordered on precognition. She was acutely aware of the dangers, but her unwavering spirit and determination to fight for freedom pushed her forward. Her youth and inexperience were balanced by an extraordinary sensitivity to the dreamscape's nuances. The last member of the group was a hulking figure, seemingly out of place in this ethereal landscape. He was Silas, a man whose very presence commanded respect. Silas, a former military strategist, possessed a strategic mind and a tactical prowess second to none. He was responsible for the resistance, overall strategy, and the training of new recruits. His wisdom wasn't born in this dream world, but his understanding of the architect's plans, drawn from his real-world experience of the organization's control mechanisms, was invaluable. His presence here was a reminder that the fight was not confined to the dreamscape. Lyra greeted Anya with a serene smile. "We have been expecting you," she said, her voice a soft whisper that resonated deeply within Anya's consciousness. "The whispers have carried your approach. Your strength, your spirit, they've been felt even at this distance." Anya felt a wave of warmth wash over her, a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. These weren't just fellow travelers in a surreal dreamscape, they were comrades, united by a shared purpose, bound by a common cause. The fear that had shadowed her for so long began to recede, replaced by a burgeoning hope. Over the next few days, Anya learned more about the resistance, their methods, their strategies, and their unwavering commitment to their cause. Lyra explained the nuances of the architect's control, how they manipulated the very fabric of reality to maintain their grip on humanity. "They don't just control information," Lyra explained, her voice low and intense. "They control perception, emotion, memory. They weave their influence into the very architecture of our dreams, subtly shaping our thoughts, our beliefs, our desires. They create a reality where their control feels natural, inevitable." Kai demonstrated techniques for navigating the shifting landscapes of the dreamscape, for manipulating the energy currents, for creating temporary shelters from the architect's assaults. He taught Anya how to sense the subtle shifts in energy, how to anticipate the changes in the landscape, how to adapt to the ever-changing environment. Alara showed her how to recognize the architect's illusions, how to differentiate between genuine perceptions and cleverly crafted mirages. She trained Anya to sharpen her intuition, to trust her instincts, and to discern the hidden truths obscured by the architect's deceptive manipulations. Silas, meanwhile, spent countless hours discussing strategy, analyzing the architect's patterns, and mapping the hidden pathways within the dreamscape. He shared his real-world understanding of the organization's strategies, helping Anya understand the connection between the dreamscape and the waking world. Each member of the group had a unique skill set, a unique perspective. Yet they were bound together by a shared vision, a belief in the power of human consciousness, and a fierce determination to resist the architect's control. They represented a microcosm of humanity itself, a testament to the potential for unity in the face of overwhelming adversity. Their unity was not a simple matter of agreement. There were disagreements, heated debates, and moments of doubt. The shared struggle, however, forged a bond stronger than any ideological differences. Their collective strength grew from their individual weaknesses. Alara's vulnerability fueled the group's protective instinct, and Silas's rigid strategy was softened by Lyra's empathy. They were a collective consciousness, mirroring the very essence of what they were fighting to protect. Anya's training with the Resistance wasn't merely physical or tactical. It was a profound journey of self-discovery. She confronted her own fears, her own insecurities, her own doubts. She learned to harness her inner strength, to cultivate her resilience, to become a more powerful and resourceful individual. The dreamscape itself became a crucible, forging her into a warrior of consciousness. The nights were spent analyzing data collected during the day's explorations. The Resistance had developed a sophisticated system for recording information within the dreamscape, using bioluminescent patterns that could be interpreted and mapped. The data represented a collective understanding of the landscape, which was critical to successfully navigating and resisting the architect's control. They mapped the shifting pathways, the hidden dangers, and the locations of the architect's most potent illusions. The process involved deep focus and collaborative effort, bringing the Resistance even closer. The days were spent exploring the dreamscape, honing their skills, testing their resilience. It was a grueling process, testing both their physical and mental limits. The architect's illusions became more elaborate, their attacks more insidious. But with each challenge, the Resistance grew stronger, their resolve hardened, their unity solidified. They learned to rely on each other, to trust each other, to fight as one. Anya realized that their struggle wasn't just about escaping the architect's control. It was about becoming something more, something stronger, something unified. Anya, once a solitary artist, now found herself a part of something larger than herself, a member of a community fighting for the very essence of human freedom. The whispers in the dreamscape no longer sounded like a battle cry. They were a symphony of resistance, a chorus of voices united against the architect's tyrannical control. The war for humanity's mind continued, but now Anya was not alone. She was surrounded by allies, friends, and fellow warriors, and together they would face the architects and fight for the freedom of consciousness. The obsidian waterfall continued its mesmerizing descent, the rhythmic cascade a counterpoint to Lyra's quiet explanation. The architect's control isn't brute force, she began, gesturing with a delicate hand towards the shimmering pool below. It's far more insidious, far more pervasive. They've mastered the art of subtle manipulation, weaving their influence into the very fabric of our subconscious. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. Anya, still absorbing the enormity of her situation, leaned forward, captivated by Lyra's measured tone. Kai, his eyes closed, seemed to be drawing energy from the landscape itself, the subtle hum of the dreamscape vibrating through him. Alara, ever vigilant, scanned their surroundings with an intensity that made Anya feel a prickle of unease. Silas, his expression unreadable, stood silently, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the impossible landscape faded into an ethereal mist. "Imagine," Lyra continued, her voice a low hum, "a symphony conducted not with a baton, but with whispers. Whispers that shape your emotions, your desires, your very perception of reality. They don't tell you what to think. They subtly influence how you think, ensuring the conclusions they desire are always within reach. She described the architect's technology, a marvel of bioengineering and neural manipulation. It wasn't crude mind control, she stressed, but a sophisticated system of subtle suggestions, carefully calibrated to bypass conscious resistance. They used bioluminescent nanoparticles, almost invisible to the naked eye, that could be introduced into the bloodstream, the air, even through the skin. These particles, she explained, acted as receivers and transmitters, intercepting and modifying neural signals associated with emotions, memories, and decision-making. Think of it like a finely tuned radio, Kai interjected, opening his eyes and offering a rare smile. They're not broadcasting a single message, but a constant stream of subliminal suggestions carefully crafted to influence our emotional responses. Fear, doubt, uncertainty, these are the tools of their trade. They amplify the negative while subtly dampening the positive. He illustrated this with a vivid example. He spoke of a recent resistance operation, where the architects had flooded a key area of the dreamscape with images of despair, hopelessness, and betrayal, effectively crippling the rebels' resolve and coordination. The effect wasn't immediate. It was a slow, insidious erosion of confidence, a creeping doubt that had taken root in the minds of even the most stalwart fighters, before they were able to understand the source of the malaise. Alara provided a counterpoint, describing how she'd detected the shift in energy, the subtle changes in the landscape's bioluminescence that hinted at the architect's manipulation. It was a subtle distortion, she said, her voice barely a whisper, a dissonance in the harmony of the dreamscape. It wasn't a sudden assault, but a gradual poisoning of the atmosphere, a slow decay of trust. She explained the complex patterns they used to identify these disturbances, demonstrating how an untrained mind wouldn't notice the subtle variations in hue, the almost imperceptible shifts in the rhythm of the bioluminescent flora. Silas Kama, speaking for the first time, added a layer of chilling realism. He drew upon his real-world knowledge of the architect's organization, revealing their extensive network of influence across society. He explained how their technology wasn't confined to the dreamscape. It permeated the waking world, subtly influencing elections, shaping public opinion, and maintaining control through a carefully crafted narrative of fear and compliance. The dreamscape is just one part of their strategy, Silas explained. It's where they refine their techniques, hone their methods, and test the limits of their control. The manipulation they practice here is a precursor to a far more pervasive and insidious campaign in the waking world. He outlined how seemingly unrelated events, economic downturns, political scandals, even social trends, were all carefully orchestrated components of the architect's grand scheme, subtly guiding humanity towards a predetermined outcome, a future where their control was absolute. Lyra summarized, her voice carrying a chilling weight. They're not just controlling our actions, they're sculpting our very perceptions of reality. They're shaping our hopes, our fears, our beliefs, our very identities. They've created a world where their control feels natural, inevitable, even desirable. Anya found herself grappling with this new, horrifying understanding. The architects weren't just villains. They were masterful puppeteers, manipulating the strings of consciousness with an artistry that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It wasn't the overt acts of aggression that Anya found most frightening. It was the subtle, persistent nature of the manipulation. This control was exerted at a level that was virtually invisible, a constant, insidious pressure that shaped perceptions and beliefs before they even reached the level of conscious thought. The discussion expanded beyond the mechanics of the technology. They spoke of the ethical implications, the philosophical consequences of such pervasive control. The conversation brought to the forefront the question of free will versus determinism, raising complex considerations that challenged Anya's understanding of human agency. Was free will an illusion, a mere construct of a manipulated mind? Or was there something intrinsically human, an essential element of consciousness that could resist even the most sophisticated forms of control? The conversation delved into counter-strategies, focusing not merely on technological solutions, but on the cultivation of individual resilience and collective consciousness. They discussed techniques to enhance awareness, to strengthen mental defenses, and to develop a collective resistance to the architect's insidious influence. The techniques weren't just about fighting the technology, they were about fostering critical thinking, promoting self-awareness, and cultivating a profound understanding of the human condition. The key, Lyra explained, lay in the ability to discern the difference between genuine emotions and those subtly implanted through the architect's manipulation. The members of the resistance shared personal stories of manipulation, experiences where they'd unknowingly fallen prey to the architect's whispers. They'd initially experienced moments of doubt, moments of fear and uncertainty that had been so powerfully insidious that they doubted their own perceptions. These personal accounts served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability inherent in the human condition and underscored the critical need for vigilance and mutual support in the face of this insidious threat. The collective sharing provided an essential tool for navigating the confusing labyrinth of manipulated consciousness, strengthening the group's resilience through a deep understanding of the commonality of experience. The night ended not with a plan of attack, but with a deepening understanding of the enemy, a newfound awareness of the subtle and insidious nature of the architect's control. Anya realized that escaping their grasp required not just technological prowess or strategic brilliance, but a profound transformation of consciousness, a collective awakening to the power of self-awareness, and an unwavering commitment to reclaiming human agency from the grasp of technological manipulation. The war for freedom wasn't merely a physical battle, but a spiritual one, a fight for the very essence of what it meant to be human, to think freely and to choose one's own path. The obsidian waterfall pulsed with a faint ethereal light, its rhythmic roar a constant backdrop to their hushed conversation. Anya, still reeling from the revelations of the previous hours, found herself strangely calmed by the dreamscape's surreal beauty. The enormity of the architect's control, the insidious nature of their manipulation threatened to overwhelm her, yet the shared burden, the collective strength of the resistance group, offered a fragile counterpoint to despair. Lyra, ever the pragmatist, broke the silence. "Our understanding of the architect's methods is only half the battle," she said, her voice a low, resonant hum. "We need a strategy, a plan to expose them, to awaken others to the truth." Kai, his eyes reflecting the shimmering light of the waterfall, nodded in agreement. Their power relies on secrecy, on the insidious nature of their influence. If we can bring their methods into the light, expose their manipulation for what it is, we can weaken their hold. Alara, her gaze fixed on the swirling patterns of bioluminescence in the pool below, added a crucial element to the discussion. We need to identify their key nodes of influence within the dreamscape, the points where their manipulation is most concentrated, where the distortion of reality is most profound. She outlined a plan, a meticulous process of mapping the dreamscape's energy flow, identifying subtle anomalies that betrayed the architect's presence. Her plan involved a network of sensors, a sophisticated system of data analysis, and a deep understanding of the dreamscape's intricate bioluminescent ecosystems. The sensors, she explained, would be disguised as natural elements, seamlessly integrating with the environment, avoiding detection by the architect's surveillance systems. Silas, his face etched with a grim determination, contributed his expertise in the architect's real-world operations. "We need to parallel Alara's work in the dreamscape with a coordinated campaign in the waking world," he stated. "We need to expose their influence on media, on politics, on the very fabric of society." He outlined a multi-pronged approach, hacking into their communication networks, leaking classified documents, and mobilizing public awareness through carefully targeted leaks to select media outlets. He emphasized the importance of timing, of coordinating the dreamscape and real-world operations to maximize their impact, creating a cascading effect that would crumble the architect's carefully constructed facade of control. Their discussion evolved into a detailed plan, a complex tapestry woven from technological expertise, strategic planning, and a shared understanding of the architect's vulnerabilities. They agreed on a phased approach, starting with carefully targeted interventions in the dreamscape, gradually escalating the intensity and scope of their actions as they gained momentum. The initial phase focused on exposing the architect's manipulation within specific dreamscapes, using Alara's map to identify areas of high concentration of their influence. They'd begin by disseminating counter-messages, subtly altering the emotional landscape of those dreamscapes, promoting hope, resilience, and a sense of self-agency. The second phase would involve a more direct confrontation, a calculated assault on the architect's key nodes of influence. They'd utilize Kai's mastery of the dreamscape's energy flows to disrupt their manipulative signals, creating localized pockets of resistance, areas where individuals could experience a momentary reprieve from the architect's influence. Silas would simultaneously coordinate a series of targeted leaks in the real world, exposing specific instances of the architect's manipulation in the political and media landscapes. The third phase, the most ambitious and risky, aimed at triggering a mass awakening. They would unleash a wave of counterinformation, a torrent of truth designed to shatter the architect's carefully constructed illusion of control. This phase would be a delicate balance of subtlety and boldness, requiring impeccable timing and strategic deployment of their resources. The success of this phase depended on the collective engagement of others, on their ability to inspire widespread resistance and build a critical mass of individuals actively challenging the architect's control. Anya, initially hesitant, found herself swept up in the energy of their collective planning. The detailed strategy, the meticulous attention to detail, injected a dose of pragmatic hope into the daunting task ahead. The shared vision wasn't simply about overthrowing the architects. It was about awakening humanity to its own agency, to its innate capacity for resistance. The plan wasn't without its risks. The architects were powerful, their reach extensive, their surveillance pervasive. A single misstep could have devastating consequences. But the alternative, silent compliance, a life lived under the shadow of manipulative control, was far worse. The growing sense of camaraderie, the shared commitment to freedom, bolstered their resolve. They were not just fighting for their own liberation, they were fighting for the future of humanity itself. Lyra outlined a crucial aspect of their strategy, cultivating a sense of collective awareness. We need to create a network, a system of mutual support, where individuals can share their experiences, identify signs of manipulation, and build collective resilience, she explained. This network would serve as a bulwark against the architect's influence, a haven where individuals could strengthen their mental defenses, sharpen their critical thinking skills, and learn to distinguish genuine emotions from the subtle suggestions of the architects. This network wouldn't rely on technology alone. It would foster a culture of self-awareness, a collective understanding of the human condition, and a deep appreciation for the power of shared experience. It would involve workshops, seminars, and support groups, all designed to build resilience and cultivate a sense of collective agency. The members shared personal stories of moments when they were manipulated, how subtle shifts in emotion or perspective had led them to make choices that weren't entirely their own. This sharing fostered empathy, understanding, and a commitment to supporting each other in navigating the deceptive terrain of manipulated consciousness. The conversation stretched late into the night, illuminated by the ethereal glow of the dreamscape. They explored various communication methods, devising secure channels to disseminate information and maintain contact, even under the architect's constant surveillance. They discussed the ethical dilemmas inherent in their strategy, weighing the potential risks against the urgent need to liberate humanity from the architect's grip. The ethical discussions underscored the complexity of their mission, highlighting the need for a delicate balance between strategic effectiveness and the unwavering commitment to human rights and dignity. The night ended not with definitive answers, but with a shared sense of purpose, a renewed commitment to the fight ahead. Anya, no longer paralyzed by fear, felt a surge of defiant hope. The architects were powerful, but they were not invincible. The human spirit, when united and empowered by a shared vision, possessed a resilience that could withstand even the most sophisticated forms of control. The battle for freedom was far from over, but the seeds of rebellion had been sown, and the echoes of their shared vision resonated through the dreamscape, a promise of a future reclaimed. The future, they knew, would depend not only on their strategic brilliance, but on their ability to awaken others to the truth, to inspire a collective awakening that would shake the very foundations of the architect's control. The first strike was meticulously planned, a surgical incision into the architect's seemingly impenetrable fortress. Alara, using her intricate map of the dreamscape's energy flows, identified a relatively isolated node, a recurring dreamscape frequented by individuals known for their susceptibility to the architect's subtle manipulations. This was a testing ground, a chance to gauge the architect's response to their intervention before escalating to larger, riskier operations. Kai, utilizing his innate connection to the dreamscape's bioluminescent energy, prepared to subtly alter the emotional landscape of the selected dreamscape. He wouldn't directly confront the architect's influence. Instead, he'd introduce counter-narratives, subtly shifting the emotional currents, weaving threads of hope, resilience, and self-awareness into the fabric of the dreamscape. His goal wasn't to erase the architect's manipulation, but to create pockets of resistance, to empower individuals to recognize and reject the insidious whispers of control. Simultaneously, Silas launched a small-scale campaign in the waking world. He chose a minor yet influential politician known for his susceptibility to the architect's propaganda. Silas, through a carefully crafted leak to a trusted journalist, exposed a series of inconsistencies and contradictions in the politician's public statements, subtly hinting at the architect's manipulative influence. The leak was designed to be ambiguous enough to avoid outright accusations while planting seeds of doubt in the public consciousness. The aim was to create a ripple effect, a questioning of established narratives, a subtle erosion of the architect's authority. The operation began under the cloak of the dreamscape's ethereal night. Kai, with intense focus, began his work. He felt the subtle resistance of the architect's influence, a pushback against his attempt to alter the emotional currents. It was like trying to steer a river against its natural flow, a delicate dance requiring precision and patience. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to weave his counter-narratives, injecting threads of self-belief and agency into the dreamscape's narrative. He observed the subtle shifts in the dreamscape's bioluminescent patterns, a visual representation of the emotional responses of the individuals within. Initially, there was resistance, a struggle against the ingrained patterns of manipulation. But gradually, as Kai's counter-narratives took hold, the bioluminescence began to shift, reflecting a growing sense of awareness, a burgeoning resistance to the architect's control. Meanwhile, Silas watched as the news of the politician's exposed inconsistencies spread like wildfire across social media. The response was mixed. Some dismissed it as mere political maneuvering, others as a blatant attack on a respected figure. But a significant number began to question the politician's motives, his past statements, his relationship with established power structures. The seeds of doubt had been sown, the first cracks in the architect's carefully constructed facade. The first 24 hours after the operation were filled with tense anticipation. The rebels monitored the dreamscape and the real-world response, watching for any sign of the architect's countermeasures. Anya, despite her apprehension, felt a flicker of hope. The initial results were encouraging. Their intervention had created a noticeable disruption, a crack in the architect's control. However, their optimism was short-lived. On the second day, the architects retaliated. The response wasn't a brute force assault, it was more subtle, more insidious. In the dreamscape, Kai noticed a significant increase in the intensity of the architect's manipulative signals. They were no longer simply suggesting. They were actively overriding his counter-narratives, reinforcing the existing patterns of control. The bioluminescent patterns shifted dramatically, reflecting a wave of disorientation and confusion amongst the individuals within the dreamscape. Simultaneously, in the real world, Silas witnessed a coordinated counteroffensive. Pro-government media outlets launched a smear campaign against the journalist who had published the leak, discrediting his sources and attempting to suppress any further investigation into the politician's activities. The architect's response was swift, organized, and incredibly effective. Their control, it seemed, was far more entrenched than they had initially anticipated. The rebels regrouped, analyzing their failures and reassessing their strategy. The first strike, while not a complete failure, had highlighted the vastness and sophistication of their opponent's power. The architect's response had been swift and decisive, demonstrating their ability to monitor, react, and suppress any challenge to their control. The initial success had been fleeting, overshadowed by the architect's formidable countermeasures. This setback, however, didn't break their resolve. It served as a harsh reminder of the challenges ahead, a stark illustration of the power they were up against. The small-scale operation had revealed crucial information: the architect's ability to swiftly identify and neutralize threats, the pervasiveness of their surveillance, and the effectiveness of their propaganda machine. The initial sense of hope was tempered with a newfound realism. The battle for liberation, it became clear, would be long, arduous, and fraught with danger. The architects were not merely manipulating individuals, they were manipulating the very fabric of reality, creating a system of control that intertwined the dreamscape and the waking world. The rebels had underestimated the depth and complexity of that control. The failure of the first strike, however, wasn't entirely negative. It provided invaluable insights into the architect's methods, their weaknesses, and their strengths. It sharpened the rebels' understanding of their own capabilities and limitations. The lessons learned from this initial setback would prove invaluable in the planning of future operations. The information gathered would allow them to refine their strategies, develop more sophisticated countermeasures, and prepare for a much larger, more decisive confrontation. The experience left the rebels with a newfound respect for the power of the architects and a stronger sense of urgency in their mission. The small-scale operation was a critical learning experience, a reminder that the fight for freedom would require not only courage and ingenuity, but also patience, resilience, and a deep understanding of the enemy's capabilities. Anya, watching the bioluminescence in the waterfall fade and reform, felt the weight of the challenge ahead. The echoes of their initial strike, both the successes and failures, reverberated through the dreamscape, a potent reminder of the complex battle that lay ahead. The first strike was just the beginning. The real war had only just begun. The rebels knew they needed to adapt, to refine their strategies, and to prepare for a much larger and more decisive confrontation. The future of humanity depended on their ability to learn from their mistakes and to rise to the challenge. The fight for freedom was far from over.